Hey, this is Steve with Mid-State Litho. Today I'm going to be showing you the Challenge i780. 780 is 78 centimeters, which means that this cutter has a width of about 30.7 inches. It is a guillotine flywheel cutter, which means that it gets all of its power from a high-speed flywheel. There's a heavy disc in there that rotates at a high speed, and whenever we make a cut cycle on the cutter, a clutch is engaged, which translates that power into knife power. And that makes these machines super strong. They can cut through all kinds of stuff. And they also don't consume a whole lot of power compared to hydraulics. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and spin up the cutter. I'm going to push the motor button right here, and you'll hear this thing spin up. So we're looking underneath the cutter. You can see that we have actually a two-stage system that drives the flywheel. And the flywheel is really what gives the machine all of its power. The flywheel is basically a big spinning weight, and whenever we want to, we can engage a clutch and use that kinetic power to drive the knife. And that's what gives these types of flywheel guillotine cutters so much power. When we actually run the knife, we're using kinetic momentum to drive it. The clamp itself is also using power from the flywheel, but not nearly as much. And I'm controlling that with a foot pedal down here. And that's also affected by my clamp pressure up here. If I have very low pressure, you can see that it comes down quite slow. But if I scale that up, I can slam down on the table. Clamp pressure is a big deal on a cutter. If your clamp pressure is not right, if it's too light or too low, it can affect your cut quality. You can get blade draw in the stack, where basically you'll get a little bit of a diagonal action on the cut, and the top sheet might be looking okay, but the bottom one won't be so accurate. So clamp pressure is a big deal. Let's go ahead and watch it cycle. Okay, so hopefully you can make out the screen from here. Basically, we start out in the manual mode, which is a very simple mode of using the cutter. Basically, you're going to input a dimension, like 12 inches, for example, and then we'll send the bat gauge to that position, and then make our cut. And that's really the simplest way to use a cutter. That's actually the way that a lot of cutters are used a lot of the time. But we're going to go beyond that and get into the programming functions, especially the automatic programming functions that come with JDF. So in the cutter down here in the lower left, you can go from the manual mode to the semi-automatic mode. And the semi-automatic mode is basically where you're going to run a program job through here. And you can see that there are steps in the job, and they include turning steps. So it's even written into the program which way to turn the pile, so that one operator doesn't make a mistake and turn the pile the wrong way and mess the cut up and spoil the job. Now, to actually browse a folder on the network, we're going to go into our menu, and then we're going to go to number 4, which is the SIP4 process. And you can see up here on the top I have a text field where I can enter in a network path. And you may have already noticed these are some strange characters in there, the W with a slash in it. It's actually an encoding discrepancy. This is a Korean cutter, again, I'll remind you. And a lot of the coding is done in Korean, and when they translate to our US character set, the backslash, which we use in networking, displays as a W with a dash through it. That's fine, really. It's just a display issue. The characters do actually work, and this network path will actually work. So the common format for that pathing is 2 backslashes, and then the server name. In our case, our server is named Lenovo, so that's the name, and then we'll continue with backslashes to go further down our folder tree, and that's how we build our path for the network. The refresh button will actually read the folder, and you can see in my case I've got 3 PPF files in here. And that is what the cutter is looking for to program its cutting. It's going to look for a PPF file. If you touch a PPF file, it's going to display a preview of the cut program of that. And the red lines here are basically showing where our final trim is going to be, and the big white area is our parent sheet size. If you hit Make Cutting Process, it's going to start to write the cutting program itself, and then it will show this screen where you basically apply that program to memory. So we're going to load that in the memory position, number 8 for example. And here it is. It's got our full program, and I can look, that's actually a 20-step program that's going to do all the cuts necessary, and it's all pre-programmed and set up. So even somebody who's not familiar with the machine or knows what the final job is supposed to look like, they can get through it. So there's a little bit more in here that I can cover. I just press the gear button right here, and it brings me up 3 options. Knife Prohibit, Clamp Prohibit, and high-speed cutting. Knife Prohibit and Clamp Prohibit are pretty self-explanatory. They will lock out either the knife or the clamp, or both, from cycling when you press the cut buttons. And there's reasons for that are pretty varied. You know, people cut all kinds of stuff on these cutters, and sometimes you don't want to clamp it. So that's what that's for. But the third one, high-speed cutting, is interesting. It is a high-speed cutting mode. It will speed up your cycle time of the cutter and allow you to get through your job a little bit faster. There is a trade-off though. We're basically using more clamp power to move it faster, and that can be a little bit rough on the stock. Sometimes the clamp is going to hammer down on that stock, and you can see some marking on delicate paper. So high-speed cutting mode is really not to be used with any super thin or super delicate papers. It's a pretty good chance you're going to leave a mark on it with the clamp. But it's there if you want it, and it works pretty well on most of the other things. So if you want to speed up, by all means use it. This button right here is for pushing air out of the stack. If you imagine a big 20 by 30 stack of paper that I put in there, I could put it in and then press this button, and then when I hit the cut buttons, I'm not going to do it right now, but if I hit the cut buttons, the cutter's going to do a cool little routine. It'll bring the clamp down and then lift up, inch the paper forward about 4 inches or so, bring the clamp down again, lift it up, move the paper again, and it'll keep doing that all the way down the sheet. And the purpose for that is to squeeze the air out of the paper. That will give you a much tighter stack that's going to hold register and be a nice big block that you can cut more accurately. That's actually a real common thing that a lot of cutter operators just do on their own. So DAEHO putting a button in there for that function is kind of a cool time saver. We also have a calculator here. It does exactly what you expect from a calculator. If you just want to figure something out real quick, you can do that without having to pull something out. Back here in the menu, I'm going to go into the Process Manager. Process Manager is really a job manager. The translation here is a little funny, if you ask me. They call it a process. I call it a program. When you're programming the cutter, you know, you're programming all your cuts where to go, but process is the word they use. So basically in this screen I show all of my programs or processes, and I can edit them, copy them, or delete them from this screen. Or I can make a new one, and at that point I would then write my program exactly how I want it from scratch, and that's really kind of the old way of doing things. With JDF coming through the pipeline, if I can just pull a job file out of a folder and have it write the whole program for me, that's awesome. It's really a big time saver. So mostly I would expect that anybody who has JDF is going to use it. It's a big time saver, but the cutter is certainly capable of working as a manual machine or as just a common programmable cutter where you can enter in your own dimension. Alright, again, I'm Steve with Midstate Litho. This is the Challenge i780 DAEHO paper cutter. Hopefully you got to see what you wanted to see in this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach us at 1-800-343-4231, or you can visit us online at midstatelitho.net. Thank you.